Hi, and welcome back to our certification exam rapid training series. This is the fourth of 6 videos that we have in terms of the AZ-204 or Azure Developer Exam. So we're focusing in for this video on Azure security. So again, this is 15 to 20% of the exam, and we're focused in on user authentication authorization. So we really have to understand OAuth 2 in that process flow. In implementing secure cloud solutions, what does that mean? That's focused in on Key Vault and managed identities. So let's start out with user auth. You really need to understand how to implement OAuth 2 authentication, as I'd mentioned, and create and implement shared access signatures and what a shared access signature provides and some of the key capabilities that you can configure on a shared access signature. Understand that you need to register apps with Azure Active Directory to be able to authenticate users. Go through the registration process, quite simple if you log into Azure Active Directory and register apps. Understand RBAC, so controlling access to resources by using role-based access controls. RBAC's been on this exam for quite a while, so hopefully you've been familiar with RBAC and role-based access controls. So starting out with the identity platform, as a developer in the past, we were focused on ADAL or the Azure AD Authentication Library. Know that we've moved to MSAL, or the Microsoft Authentication Library, with the new v2.0 endpoint. So you really want to focus in on MSAL, not ADAL for this exam. So focus in on version 2 and understanding the different account types and how you can target social logins as well to see. So understanding that we can auth against Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, some of the external services as well. And there's the library, MSAL. I would highly advise you look at that library and the various capabilities in that library. So understanding objects in Azure Active Directory, as I mentioned, there's application registration with Azure Active Directory. So you need to really focus in on how we register an application, why we would register an application. Understand the security principles, such as a user principle and a service principle, where we would apply those objects and how we would use those particular objects. So again, the OAuth 2 process flow, we really have to understand the various steps in terms of this process flow. I would highly advise that you not memorize this, but walk through and understand the various steps and what it means. What you really have to focus in on is the token process and where the token is being handled throughout the entire process from beginning to end. So this is an example web application. A user is logging in to starting with the browser to the web server, all the way back to an API that does the validation against Azure Active Directory. Shared access signatures or SAS tokens. These are URIs that grant access to a protected resource. Know that they are time-based. You can actually apply a start time and an expiration time for these particular tokens and the token access. They can only be used with secure request or secure communications, and you can apply permission levels to the resource if you're giving a SAS token to a particular resource, such as a blob or a storage account. I talked about MSAL earlier, and again, the Microsoft Authentication Library. This is a library that's going to streamline us working with the Microsoft Identity Platform. So we're able to access tokens, manage those tokens, refresh them, pass them around. And again, it's available on multiple platforms. You'll see JavaScript library, .NET, Android, iOS, etc. Java libraries, so that you can access it using multiple different libraries. And understand the various authentication providers. They're going to implement the code required to acquire the token using MSAL. So they can handle a number of potential errors for cases like incremental consent, expired passwords, conditional access, and then set the HTTP request authorization header. So you need to understand some of the different providers and their capabilities. So securing cloud solutions. The focus here is key vaults, so managing secrets, certificates, various keys, and then of course managed identities and what managed identities bring to our capability as a developer. So starting with Azure Key Vault, really the key to Key Vault, to be a little funny here, is essentially storing the certificates, passwords, those kind of values, and know that these vaults are backed by hardware security modules or HSMs. So you can, this is again a managed service, and we really need to understand how we're accessing the vault and how to access the various keys, passwords, and certificates. So that as a developer, that's the interfacing that we're looking towards, not really implementing the key vault itself, but how do we access and interface to the various parts of the key vault. So managed identity, you want to keep credentials out of code essentially. So we're looking at automatically managing various identities. Understand there's different types. There's a user managed identity and a system managed identity. So starting out, the system assigned managed identity, this shares a lifecycle with the resource. So this is assigned to that particular resource. So if you were to delete, say, API management or your logic app, that managed identity will be deleted along with the deletion of that particular resource. So it lives and dies with that particular resource. So the credentials are provisioned onto the instance after the identity is created. Again, the lifecycle lives and dies with that particular resource. So a user assigned managed identity can be shared amongst multiple Azure resources, but it does not die with that particular resource if you were to delete that resource. So it's a standalone resource effectively for accessing multiple resources. So here again, here's our types of managed identities. The system assigned versus user assigned. Their creation, the lifecycle, and sharing across various Azure resources. You really need to understand the differences here, especially as you look to implement managed identities as a developer. Azure App Configuration. So we want to be able to store various settings in configuration values across our various implementations. So we need to understand, as a developer, how does this impact my local configuration? Say I'm developing a web application and I have a web config, or I have a function app that I'm developing and I've got the host JSON. Does this overwrite those settings? So understand the hierarchy of the key value pairs that you're going to store inside the app configuration and how they apply to your application. So quick practice question. And this concludes our video on security, and we'll come back with another video to focus in on monitoring, troubleshooting, and optimizing Azure solutions.